The Mission Impossible franchise has now hit 8 installments, and baby, I watched all of them.
Oh, what do you want, a medal?
Okay, so the first Mission Impossible is a Brian De Palma flick through and through. You've got your split diopter shots, Dutch angles, extended POV sequences, the way he films little sensorial details, and a selection of big twists. He even gets a little gruesome with the kills. Sorry, Estevez Hive, I've got some bad news. It's a smorgasbord of De Palma goodness that ages like a fine wine. Well, with one exception. The only problem I have with this initial installment is that it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
My team is dead!
Okay, spoilers. In fact, let's just assume going forward that all of these entries contain some spoilers, all right? So, Jon Voight is the bad guy.
Whoa.
It's kinda obvious nowadays, but at the time, this was a pretty big twist, mostly on account of the character, Jim Phelps, being the hero in the original series. It's a shocking moment when he finally reveals his underhandedness. It also brings up a lot of questions. For example, what exactly was Phelps' plan? He wants to get the knock list, and so he sets up Ethan Hunt to take the fall for his whole team's murder in order to himself escape with the list. Okay, cool. No questions. But then the plan goes tits up because, oh no, the IMF was actually trying to find a mole on the inside, who it turns out is Phelps. This means that Phelps has to come up with a new plan when he discovers that the plan to steal the list was a ruse. In order to facilitate this new plan, he has his blushing bride over here meet with Ethan and reveal that she survived the murder plot. Somehow, this inevitably leads to Ethan deciding that the best course of action is to steal the real knock list from the CIA, something Phelps knows Ethan will do because reasons. In order to push Ethan to this conclusion, he also leaves behind a Bible that, through incredibly convoluted and illogical reasoning, leads Ethan to the arms dealer Max. But it turns out that Phelps never quotes scripture, which is how Ethan gains an audience with Max, and I think my brain is bleeding. There's also something to be said about the character assassination of Jim Phelps, the team leader responsible for most of the missions in the Mission Impossible TV series. This was a major problem that fans at the time had with the big screen version. They felt that the character, who diligently served his country from seasons 2 through 7 of the show, would never turn villain. It was such a big deal that Peter Graves refused to return for the film, hence the casting of Jon Voight in the role. And I don't know, man. Tough titty, I guess, since it worked out for the best in the long run, but I can see myself being a little bit pissed off that the good-hearted star of my favorite show was turned into a villain with a bass-ackwards plan that would inevitably result in the deaths of dozens, if not way more, of fellow agents. Overall, though, De Palma's initial entry in the franchise is a great little spy thriller with some not-too-serious flaws. And frankly, if you can't get past an illogical plot point or two, you're gonna have a rough going with this particular series.
Wouldn't have it any other way.
Next up, the second film, imaginatively titled Mission Impossible 2. Brian De Palma was offered the chance to return, but he felt that one was enough, and that any more would just be an excuse to make more money. And sure, yeah, with a worldwide gross of nearly $500 million against a budget of $80 million, that was probably on the studio's mind, sure. Still, the project went forward without him, and in his stead, Tom Cruise and his production team brought in the one, the only, the world's biggest Dove fan, John Woo. Now, at this point, John Woo was at the peak of his Hollywood career. He was less than a decade removed from his Hong Kong masterpiece Hard Boiled, and had followed that up with the Jean-Claude Van Damme vehicle Hard Target, then followed that up with the 1-2 punch of Broken Arrow and Face Off. Dude basically couldn't be stopped. According to Woo's commentary on MI2, Cruise loved Face Off and all of his Hong Kong films, and little Tommy wanted to make each film in a different style from a different director. Woo also considers MI2 to be a love story more than an action movie, so I figured, screw it. On this viewing, let's watch it as a love story.
This is very disconcerting.
Hey, you put me here. I just do as I'm told.
Now, like every great romance, MI2 starts off with a plane full of innocent people being brutally murdered for the sake of stealing a supervirus. Meanwhile, Ethan Hunt is on vacation climbing big rocks, like you do, where he's given his mission to track down the virus, Chimera, with the aid of a hot thief played by Tandy Wayne Newton. Hunt is instantly attracted to this thief, named Naya, and after an incredibly impractical car chase conversation, the two of them seem to fall madly in love. Unfortunately, the reason for her involvement isn't that she's such a great thief, but that she was once in a relationship with our villain Sean Ambrose, as portrayed by Doug Ray Scott. Now, his casting, by the way, has got to be one of the biggest misses in Hollywood history. Not only is he just not very good in the role, but Scott turned down being Wolverine in order to be in this film. Freaking Wolverine. Anyway, to help with the case, Hunt recruits his old pal Luther from part 1, played by Ving Rhames once again, and Aussie comedy relief Billy Baird, whom we'll never see again after this installment.
Shit. Yes, it is.
This film was written by Robert Towne, by the way. The same guy who gave us Chinatown. Freaking Chinatown.
Well, this is not mission difficult, Mr. Hunt. It's mission impossible. Difficult should be a walk in the park for you.
And, okay, so what's the big plan to take down Ambrose? Simple, just a little old-fashioned sex trafficking. Yes, sir, the whole purpose of Naya is to be a love doll for Ambrose, who has it bad for this broad, to the point that even though he somehow knows that she's working for IMF, he still lets her stick around because, hey, homeboy wants to bang, you dig?
Why should I deny myself the pleasure of a ride or two?
Now, I could go on and on about the plot of Mission Impossible 2. It's a mess, albeit one predicated on a pretty simple plot. So simple that at one point, Ethan even calls out how little it really matters.
That simple, huh? Why not?
This could work just fine given Woo's attempt to pull off a romance rather than an action epic. But how well is that going?
I don't have a conscience. I'm a bloody thief.
Well, it's a bit disconcerting that Naya's skills as a thief don't even really come into play for the most part. At one point, she steals a memory card from Ambrose by picking his pocket, but the film doesn't even let her do this one task without screwing up and returning the card to the wrong pocket, thereby showing the guy who already knows she's there to betray him that she's there to betray him. What I'm getting at is that Naya as a character isn't serviced very well by Robert Towne's script, and because of that, it kind of falters as a romance.
You know women, mate. Like monkeys they are. Won't let go of one branch till they get a grip on the next.
The branches are penises, you see. But with that criticism in mind, there is something hopelessly romantic about Naya injecting herself with Chimera, and Ethan, not ready to lose her, going on a truly insane mission, including an incredible motorcycle chase that has to be seen to be believed to save her life. The threat of Chimera being spread around the world is secondary to her plight, which takes center stage during the third act. It's a thrilling finale, but as far as romantic intrigue goes, I don't know, it doesn't all gel.
That's exactly what Gratsky said 27 hours before he died.
It's frankly wild that this spawned a franchise. In any other world, this would be the end, and I say that as someone who legit enjoys the off-the-wall lunacy that Woo brings to the table. It's blighted by some pretty dour low points, sure, but it's also a uniquely 2000s movie with plenty of truly bonkers decisions behind the scenes. So why did we get a sequel? Well, that's easy. Money, baby! Come on! This one grossed over $500 million, so of course a sequel was inevitable, even if critics were less than thrilled with the movie itself. It would take 6 years, but eventually we got it. Mission Impossible 3. Now, the reason for that relatively long gestation period comes down to the development process more than anything else, at least as far as I can tell. Did you know that we almost got a David Fincher-directed Mission Impossible? That's right, he almost took over, but bowed out due to some sort of creative differences. From there, Joe Carnahan came on board with what he described as a punk rock version of Mission Impossible. His idea was a lower-budgeted conspiracy thriller type of flick, a la Marathon Man, and this didn't jive with the producers at Paramount. He quit and wound up being replaced with J.J. Abrams, whom Cruise was familiar with after binge-watching Alias. And Abrams really is the main takeaway with MI3. Which was his directorial debut. Sure, there's plenty to enjoy here. Philip Seymour Hoffman absolutely decimates as the villainous Owen Davian, and we get some great quotable lines from Lawrence Fishburne.
But I bullshit you not, I will bleed on the flag to make sure the stripes stay red.
God, that's so cool. He's so cool.
It's unacceptable that chocolate makes you fat, but I've eaten my share, and guess what?
Then there's the action. Just look at Tom Cruise getting positively wrecked by a drone. Hell yeah. And that whole rescue mission that starts things off, absolute action nirvana, no notes. It's a fun little flick. Unfortunately, it is let down a bit by Abrams, whose inexperience with feature filmmaking seems to seep into the whole enterprise. His style is dominated by extreme close-ups and hectic editing, which is so abundant that it's easy to overlook a lot of the really well-done action and stunt work. Also, okay, what's up with the relationship between disposable agent Maggie Q and disposable agent Guy from Tudors? They're both given a few brief moments of characterization for seemingly no real purpose, as if they were expected to return for the next episode. In fact, therein lies my big issue with MI3. It feels like a TV show. The whole style, the focus on family drama, everything just feels like it belongs on Fox. Now, don't get me wrong, it's a bonkers fun TV show, and one that would put any other program to shame, but a TV show nonetheless. On the more positive side, this one represents a huge story shift for the Mission Impossible franchise by introducing recurring characters Julia and Benji, both of whom will go on to be extremely important to the series as a whole, even if Julia doesn't feature very heavily on screen. I don't really have much else to say about Part 3, but just to be clear, this is a rollicking good action flick. Don't let my few negative points paint the wrong picture. As much as I don't think this is anywhere near the best of the series, it's still well worth a rewatch and holds its own as a respectable action flick. Okay, let's just watch Tom Cruise get wrecked one more time. Yeah. Then came director Brad Bird's take on the franchise with Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol. I wasn't a huge fan of this one upon my initial viewing during its theatrical run, but over time it's definitely grown on me. I think the problem I had at the time was that it all felt a bit too silly, a bit too cartoonish, as you might expect from the director of The Incredibles. It's also perhaps the most overburdened by bland CGI. As cool as the Kremlin sequence is, it strains credulity both by being inherently ridiculous for Ethan to survive the explosion, and by just kinda looking pretty janky. Speaking of janky, woof, that sandstorm sequence. I know I'm gonna get some pushback here, but I really think that having Ethan running around in a sandstorm was a bad idea. On paper, it's cool, but practically speaking, it means that much of the action is hard to parse out. Specifically, the car chase that we get here is easily the worst of the franchise. It's just sort of forgettable, and that's again down to really not being able to see a whole lot of what's happening. There's a cool moment where Ethan drives into Cobalt's car, leading to this epic shot, but that's about all there is to the sequence in my opinion. Of course, that sequence does follow one of the most iconic scenes in the franchise, Ethan having to climb up the outside of the Burj Khalifa. This was the first big stunt that really became bigger than the movie it was in, and it's not hard to see why. Tom Cruise is actually doing the stunts himself on the side of the tallest building in the world. The only CGI is erasing the wires that are keeping him from falling to his death, and that practicality is thrilling to watch every time. If anything, I wish we could spend more time just watching Cruise climb and look exasperated by failing tech. Which also leads to a small problem with Ghost Protocol, or at least another small problem, which is diminishing returns. The Burj Khalifa sequence takes place roughly halfway through the film, and nothing can quite stand up to that towering achievement. I'm so sorry for that pun. The final fight in the parking garage is cool and all, but it's not Tom Cruise running down the tallest building in the world cool, you know? That said, once you tap into Ghost Protocol's wavelength, it's still a really fun ride. I can't stress enough that there's really no such thing as a bad Mission Impossible movie. There's just some that aren't as good as others, and for me, Ghost Protocol is the one I find myself revisiting the least. Next up, Rogue Nation. Like the first film, this one doesn't make a whole lot of sense if you inspect it too closely, but then that's kind of been the rub with all of them. They don't tend to make a lot of sense. Rogue Nation is the kind of spy action hijinks that fans of Mission Impossible clamor for, however, complete with a solid villain in Solomon Lane and a motorcycle chase for the ages. Plus, it introduces Ilsa Faust, who is the Queen. Praise be. Now, Ilsa aside, Rogue Nation has possibly the most pointless stunt in Tom Cruise's career, the underwater vault sequence. It's cool, don't get me wrong. Dude was able to hold his breath for like 6 minutes just to complete the stunts necessary to get longer shots of Ethan underwater. Bonafide badass over there, no qualms. That's really impressive and all, but like, It's really hard to tell. There's just so much CGI in each shot, and we look away enough that while you can still point out shots of Cruise holding his breath for long periods of time, it doesn't quite feel like a proper stunt. That's not to denigrate what director Christopher McQuarrie and Cruise and their whole team came up with. It's still super cool. But the actual stunt element gets a little lost in the shuffle. However, the underwater scene does help underscore this as an Ethan Benji love story. Stay with me. In Ghost Protocol, we get a sense of how much Benji looks up to Ethan and how excited he is to be saving the world alongside the best spy around. In Rogue Nation, that admiration is transformed into a really strong relationship. The Vienna Opera House mission showcases a mutual respect between the two. Benji agrees to help Ethan despite orders from the CIA to stand down. He then risks his life to assist Ethan, to whom he's already shown immense loyalty under duress from the CIA, who put him through multiple lie detector tests to try and find Ethan, test which Benji passes by outright lying about their friendship. I love this shot, by the way, of the lie detector test just blipping a little bit to show that Benji has been lying this whole time. Great stuff. Benji and Ethan's bond is then doubled down on with the underwater vault scene, which Benji volunteers Ethan for under the belief that Ethan can do pretty much anything.
That doesn't sound impossible.
It's a very sweet moment when Benji walks in after the job's seemingly finished to discover Ethan on the cusp of death from drowning and to see the strong emotional bond between the two. Benji's belief in Ethan is then put to the test when Benji is kidnapped, thereby becoming the film's damsel in distress, whom Ethan will do anything to save. And in the moment, Benji trusts his friend to get the job done. Then at the end, Ethan and Benji work together to outsmart Solomon Lane, showing that these two are in sync and have developed a really beautiful partnership. Simply put, Rogue Nation is the Ethan and Benji show, and it is all the better for it.
Okay.
What really fucked over in Rogue Nation, however, is the next film, Mission Impossible Fallout. Now, Fallout was the first time in the series that the director from the previous film returned to helm another. Christopher McQuarrie seems to have perfectly dialed in what makes a successful Mission Impossible. Fallout is basically perfect action cinema, save for one frustrating element, the Halo jump sequence. Much like the diving sequence in Rogue Nation, it's an action beat that's really cool to learn about, but in practice, the stunt work involved feels borderline unnecessary. For those unaware, Cruise actually did the jump 106 times. It took 12 days, months of prep, and just a whole heck of a lot of effort for something that wound up being plastered over with tons of CGI clouds and lightning. But that's really it as far as negatives go. It's a lot of fun to rewatch Fallout while knowing who the big bad really is. I mean, it's not super hard to figure it out, but even if you're way ahead of the film, it's neat to watch Henry Cavill's John Lark working to help and hinder Ethan at the same time. See, in a film rife with references to the original, among its many callbacks is a love of complicated villain plots. It's also fun to play Spot the Shot and try to see how the edit plays with the reality behind John Lark. The way Henry Cavill looks at Tom Cruise when he says to answer for his crimes as if to say, "Yeah, this is all me playing you, old sport." The way he describes Lark to Angela Bassett just a little later on and essentially uses his cultist charisma to prove to her that Hunt is secretly Lark. It's just a delight to witness the performances, camera work, and editing all in such perfect sync. Another thing I love is how Fallout plays with reality, as seen with not only the opening allusion to Part 1, but also the imagined outcome of the breakout of Solomon Lane. Both show Ethan grappling with an intense need to save lives. And really, Fallout is at its core a study of Ethan Hunt's character. It's all about how unwilling he is to sacrifice a life, and even in the most impossible moments, how he'll risk everything to ensure the survival of innocence. I think that's what makes it the definitive Mission Impossible movie. It's the ultimate tale of absolute morality, at least in the sense of a spy who actually kills his enemies goes, versus absolute immorality, in this case represented by Solomon Lane and John Lark. Anyway, I could talk about Fallout for hours, but we're in the home stretch now, so let's continue on with our penultimate entry. We're about to deal with a lot of recency bias, but that bias starts with 2023's Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning. Who buddy? I love Dead Reckoning. It's no Fallout, but then what is? It's still a rip-roaring good time from Chris McQuarrie, now on his 3rd out of 4 entries in this franchise. Here he trades Fallout cinematographer Rob Hardy for Fraser Taggart, something I've seen many complain about, but I actually kinda like. Dead Reckoning has a clean yet chaotic feel to it that for me really works with the AI plot, and the way it visually presents the story is both theatrical and intuitive. I do prefer Hardy's work on Fallout, but this kinda harkens back to the whole conceit of each film being made under different creative teams. Sure, the director is the same, but up to this point, all three of McQuarrie's vehicles have had distinctly different looks, and for that, I think he deserves some praise. That all said, Dead Reckoning is the least visually appealing of the McQuarries, which is too bad, but hardly a deal breaker. We're still talking about some of the best action filmmaking to come out of the United States. It's not exactly a Steven Seagal joint, you know? Just a little less exciting to look at compared to the last two masterful entries in the Mission Impossible saga.
It's a high-speed chase! You just had to get the 4x4, didn't you?
One of my favorite tropes of the series is Ethan Hunt getting into car chases that span multiple vehicles. Rogue Nation and Fallout both feature examples, with Rogue Nation easily winning the award for Best Motorcycle Chunk, and Fallout probably winning Best Overall Chase, but goddamn if Dead Reckoning doesn't give that chase a run for its money with the Rome sequence featuring, amongst other things, a Fiat 500, which feels like a callback to everything constantly going wrong in Ghost Protocol. It's both extremely thrilling and just plain funny to watch Ethan and Grace attempt to escape our main henchwoman Paris, who's commandeered a real chunky boy, a police issue Hummer H2 disguised to look like an Iveco LMV. If I have any major issues with Dead Reckoning, they lie almost entirely at the feet of our villain Gabriel and the mysterious entity. I appreciate the idea of an all-knowing enemy. It makes sense given the finality being presented by this two-parter, that our antagonist would be someone or something with a leg up on Ethan Hunt and his team. However, Gabriel as a character is just... he's so self-serious and enigmatic that he comes off as a cartoonish weirdo more than a threatening, all-encompassing evil. It makes him hard to take seriously, and that's a real problem considering how much of the story relies on him being the ultimate threat to Ethan and his team. As for the entity, well, it's hard to fully grapple with that aspect until I've seen Final Reckoning. So, let's go do that. I've already seen it before recording this video, so I thought I would walk out and come back, but that's dumb. Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. Okay, boys and girls, it's that time you've all skipped through the video to get to. Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. Since this one is fresh in theaters at the time of this review, I'm going to tread very lightly on spoilers, but suffice it to say, if you haven't already, get out there, watch the movie, support cinema, make Tom Cruise happy. So, Final Reckoning. All right. What a fucking bummer.
Smart people on every side are close to panicking.
This is by no means a bad film. In fact, it might have some of the most awe-inspiring set pieces in the franchise. That's nothing to sneeze at, especially with a series so indebted to spectacle. However, it's also weighed down by a truly dire first half, which is basically all exposition and melodrama. It's aggressively self-serious, with very little time for the humor, which had been built into the franchise over the last few entries. The exposition is tedious, and the plot borderline incomprehensible. And for the life of me, I can't figure out why half the characters are even here. Nick Offerman, I'm looking at you.
Reconsider your life.
That brings up one of the most confounding issues I had with this film: the excess of it all. While the final product feels like two big set pieces stretched over nearly 3 hours, it's also chock full of plot points connected to a bunch of barely there supporting characters. Some, like the returning CIA analyst William Dunlow, are given more screen time than you'd expect, while others, like the aforementioned General played by Nick Offerman, or Tremel Tillman's awesome but unnecessary submarine commander, or even Hannah Waddingham's Admiral Neely, all feel like they should have so much more importance than they really do. Offerman and Waddingham specifically feel like they could have had their plot lines cut out entirely without any effect on the proceedings. I don't understand why they're there. Then there's the retconning, which reaches fast and furious levels of both convenience and ridiculousness. Specifically, there's a twist with Shea Wiggum's character that's certainly shocking, but feels like an unnecessary attempt at tying the whole series together. I mean, all except for MI2, which receives only the slightest reference in the film's opening montage of franchise hits. You'll be shocked to discover that Naya and Sean Ambrose aren't a part of the tying together of the franchise. The film takes place just 2 months after Dead Reckoning, but it's so far removed stylistically from that film that it feels as if years have passed. Part of that style seems to be the use of real-time action sequences, which are the primary cause for the advanced runtime. And it's an admirable effort. Both sequences are masterfully done, although the foray into silent filmmaking for the submarine sequence borders on tedious at times, no matter how awe-inspiring the filmmaking behind it might be. And I think that's really the problem with Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. It's a mixed bag of the highest order. You've got truly next-level work from the production team tied to a script that's overstuffed and undercooked at the same time. Now, some of you might think that, well, we don't go to Mission Impossible for comprehensible plotting, and that's fair, but for me, Final Reckoning is to its franchise what F9 was to the Fast and Furious films, or what Rise of Skywalker was to Star Wars. It's a far better piece of work than either of those, but the sentiment still stands. No amount of death-defying aerial shenanigans or Ethan Hunt going full Christ figure can help the problem inherent in the story here. And well, after barreling through the franchise and taking in all of its highs and lows, that's tough to contend with. Oh, and the Entity? I've decided I hate that thing. While Gabriel is a major element, the Entity is the central antagonist here, and it is a snooze. Not only is it the silliest plot element in a series filled to the brim with silly plot elements, but its whole story, complete with a bunch of so-called acolytes that also could have been cut without issue, just feels hack as all hell. When it comes time to finally face off with the damn thing, it's only saved by the fact that it's juxtaposed with Tom Cruise doing wild nonsense. There's a lot to like here, but the Entity is absolutely not part of it. Again, Final Reckoning is not a bad film, but it is definitely a disappointment.
I need you to trust me. One last time.
And that's it. I hate to end on a sour note, but that is it. 8 movies in, and all I can say is that while there are some ups and downs, Mission Impossible is still one of my favorite franchises of all time. Check them out for yourself and let me know in the comments what you think. Do you disagree with me? I'd love to hear all about why that is. So until next time, thank you for watching Screen Rant.